Paramahansa Yogananda said that by deep meditation, one should calm the waves of thoughts that cause the ordinary perceptions of reality. When this occurs, superconsciousness results, and then we're able to behold everything as it really is. So by deep meditation, we calm the waves of thoughts that cause ordinary perceptions of reality. And in this superconscious state, we're then able to behold everything as it really is. And we remember that the whole purpose of the spiritual path is to wake up, to realize what we always have been, what has always been true for us. And many people, the state of most of the individuals you probably interact with, have ordinary perceptions of reality. And that's colored by the nature of their thoughts. Whether they've been culturally ingrained to believe certain things, whether their family has encouraged them to believe certain things, or whether they themselves have simply accepted particular kinds of limitations of thought, it doesn't matter. Most individuals see reality through the lens of a particular kind of thought or a particular kind of point of view. And when it comes to practicing meditation or Kriya yoga, while the techniques themselves give us a capacity to focus, those techniques and that focus, those are tools to allow us to, in time, release identification with or attachments to thought. And by releasing that attachment to thought, we release attachment to ordinary perceptions of reality. And then, as is the purpose of yoga, we're able to see and experience life for what it is, as it exists, without the intermediary of the mind. Now, this is important when it comes to staying focused or staying enthused or inspired upon one's spiritual path or meditation path. Because there will be times when the mind becomes very active. And usually it occurs when certain kinds of conditionings arise that aren't just simply thought-based, but are also tied to certain kinds of emotional triggers or memories, some scars from the past. And it's okay to spend time exploring those things, working through them, which, as you know, is one of the reasons why I often recommend working with a skillful counselor, to have an objective opinion observer who has skill sets to help you neutralize certain mental, emotional conditions which you might be caught up in. But you also have heard me say that you don't necessarily want to turn something like counseling or that kind of help into a hobby, because then you miss the point. The sage Vasista, in a text attributed to him, he discusses how one of the most important things for us to do is to inquire, how did this world appearance come about? How did this samsara come about? How did this wheel of birth and death and suffering, how did it come about? Where did it come from? Rather than focusing on trying to understand all the little bolts and pieces and all the little the nuts and bolts of Maya, the delusion, the world that we see and experience. Focus on, well, where did it come from? How did it arise? That kind of inquiry, that kind of exploration. And it's important to keep these things in mind, because in order to stay enthused and inspired upon the path, there may be times when we have to step back and take a look at what are we doing within our meditation? What are we doing within our life? For example, sometimes in meditation, one of the things that we could be doing is practicing avoidance. Instead of actually attending to resolving the internal emotional conditions within us, we are just trying to hit the meditation techniques harder so that we don't have to look at it. Then meditation becomes one of those experiences where someone's trying to tell you something and you're sticking your fingers in your ears and closing your eyes and making sounds with your mouth so you don't have to hear them. Many times that can be what meditation is doing for certain people. It can also be applicable to aspects of your life, meaning how you live your life. Sometimes people can use the spiritual path as a way of avoiding dealing with the particular issues that they, as an expression of this infinite divine consciousness, are meant to work through, interact with as part of their role. They become reclusive, or they change up their life in such a drastic way that they don't actually have to look at those things anymore. And one of the things that I recall Mr. Davis saying to us in a large group one time when he was discussing when he first met Paramahansa Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda said to him, this isn't a path of escapism, you know. This is not a path of escapism. So we have to sometimes step back and see, are we using our processes, our techniques, our yogic lifestyles as a way to avoid dealing with that which we are here to avoid? And to keep the practice alive and inspired, it is okay to recognize that the work that you do to help neutralize any kind of conditioning that gets in the way of your direct perception of reality is part of the practice. It is Kriya Yoga practice. It is part of your meditation practice. It is part of your spiritual practice. And that by engaging that, you will likely be able to deepen your meditation experience. And you will also likely be able to deepen your appreciation for the life that is this expression of this infinite intelligence that is within us, all around us, and actually is us. So how do we do that? Well, from the very beginning, we do need to have a stable meditation practice and an organized life. You always have to start with that. Stable meditation practice means that 7 days a week, at least once a day, you are committed to meditating for a certain duration of time, effectively, intentionally, letting go of all else except for meditation, practicing that. When it comes to your daily life, having an organized life, while many people want to be a free spirit and not be tied down to anything, what individuals will find is if they commit to a certain kind of routine, a certain kind of pattern of living, going to sleep at the same time, getting up at the same time, eating meals at the same time, exercising on a regular schedule, having recreation on a regular schedule, studying spiritual literature or that which is of interest to you on a regular schedule, that what this does is it gets you in harmony with the intelligence of life. Because you may notice that for the most part, nature itself has a pretty regular schedule in all ways. You know, animals migrating, sun rising and setting, seasons coming and going. And to pull in an idea from astrology, the sun is considered to be a representation of that divine intelligence and an organized intelligence. And so that is often why yogis have an idea of meditating on the sun, or practice the Gayatri mantra, or they practice, in a sense, kind of like sun gazing, where they are just observing the presence of sunlight, the morning at dawn or at dusk. Because the idea is to attune to become in harmony with that intelligence that is represented by the sun, that flows through the sun. because it is the sun that causes our years to occur, our days to occur, along with the moon, our months to occur, the seasons to change, animals to do their thing. Even our bodies are a part of that, because all the food that we eat, even if we're not a vegetarian, is still essentially sunlight, because the predators that we eat, well, or the animals that we eat, are eating grass, which is fed by the sun. And so this light kind of sustains life. And the more we're in harmony with this sense of life and light, the more organized our bodies are, the more organized our minds are, the more organized our emotional states are, the easier it is for us to process higher states of consciousness. So having a regular life, a routine life, an organized life allows for greater clarity of awareness. Because also, if you have an organized life, a regular routine, you have less to worry about or think about. You don't have to sit around and think about, what am I going to do now? You know what you're going to do now. This is often very off-putting for some people, but once you learn to embrace that kind of discipline, it allows your inner work to blossom, because now you don't have to waste your time thinking about making these decisions. You're able to know that this time I'm doing this. That way, when you meditate, you don't have to, again, worry about your schedule. But that also helps to, in a sense, attune us to the natural rhythms of life, And by doing so, we're able to harmonize with that greater intelligence that has helped to produce this body, this mind, this experience. So when you are thinking about remaining enthused about your spiritual path, or being invigorated on your spiritual path, there's some very basic things you need to do. Regular meditation sessions and routine. You also need to treat your practice as though it is alive. As though every time you maybe read something that is inspiring to you, or you sit to meditate, that you're not just doing it again to zone out or to push away difficulties. You're doing it to have a direct experience of what is true of you at the innermost core of your being, which is true of all life. And you do that in your meditation, and it becomes a living, breathing thing. You don't just do it in your meditation. When you're reading, you have a sense that when you're studying whatever is important to you spiritually, you have a sense that that is this infinite intelligence speaking to you through the pages of these books. When you are taking a walk, when you are exercising, you are observing the changes around you. You are observing the state of nature. You are feeling your body, and you are engaging that as though it is the pulse of life happening right now, that intelligence occurring right now. And the more you're able to bring your awareness to those things as they are happening in your meditation, when you're reading, when you're going for a walk, even when you're having a conversation with someone, and you're able to see that as an expression of this energy, of this, again, this infinite intelligence, this, people call it the divine consciousness, God, but to me it's a vast intelligence. It's beyond words. Then everything kind of takes on that sense of purpose and meaning, even the difficult things. Because some of you might be in difficult situations. Maybe you've got a health issue, maybe a loved one has a health issue, maybe there are other things going on. But that too is part of this whole experience. And when we can embrace that, if it's not something that we can change, it's just a natural part of life often. When we can embrace that, then that too takes on kind of a living presence and a living intelligence. That might take some contemplation, and for most of us it takes a pretty hard knock that forces us into surrender to see that and experience that. But I encourage you to maybe start exploring that now with maybe the smaller things in your life. But it's this idea of learning to see, feel, experience everything as an expression of a higher superconscious state. You might not be able to understand it with your mind. That's okay. The mind has a role to play, but it can't comprehend everything. But you learn to see everything as an expression of this superconscious state. I remember reading a text attributed to Lahiri Mahasaya, and he discusses how everything essentially is this divine consciousness. Everything. You don't push anything away. Everything is an aspect of this divine consciousness. And that when we can see and feel and breathe and experience that, you are very close to being awake, if not awake. You do it without thinking. That's kind of the key. You do it with an inner knowing, a trust, a faith, in the same way that you trust that your body is existing right now, which it is. And again, I really wish I didn't have to keep saying this, but it doesn't mean that you let difficult things remain in your life if you can resolve them. If you can, fine, do what you can, surrender, let it go. But if you can't, then you meditate upon how is this also part of the face of divinity? How is this also a part of this divine experience? And you learn, or you ask, or you request ways of either having the strength to endure the difficulty while it occurs, or to see the truth of it, the reality of it. And what happens when you do that is you then set yourself up to ultimately appreciate a sense of oneness, true oneness. Because many people become aware of the spiritual path in a way of in a sense, escaping pain. And it's true, once you step on the spiritual path and you start applying what's in the Yoga Sutras, the yamas and the niyamas, and you start listening to what your hopefully self-realized, thoughtful, responsible teacher is trying to share with you, you start letting go of a lot of the dumbass stuff that you've done before. And in that regard, a lot of the difficulties tend to fall away. And we do have to admit that many people have problems in their life because they are essentially acting like a teenager, even though they're an adult. And so that's why part of the whole process is growing to mental, emotional maturity as well. But as you know, there are going to be, as I said to a teenager recently, you're going to have enough problems in life just because life happens, between accidents or an illness or an unexpected event. There are going to be enough problems in your life that you don't have to keep making more problems for yourself by hanging out with people that cause you problems or making choices that cause you suffering. So there does need to be a bit of a self-assessment around, well, what am I doing that might be contributing to this? And you resolve that. If there isn't anything in particular, it's just life happening, well, that's when you move into this state of contemplation and surrender, and how is this part of the bigger picture? So we have to be clear that we're not moving necessarily into a passive state where anything goes. As they say, God helps those who help themselves. So you got to help yourself out a little bit, and then let the rest be what God is. But the point that I'm trying to get at here is that you're able to really have a sense of oneness because if God, divine consciousness, is everything, and yet you say, I only want the good part, well, then you've created duality there. Religion has been trying to work at this for probably as long as religion has been around. For example, even in Christianity, the idea of the crucifixion and the suffering that Christ went through, there was a reason for that. And that suffering was also a part of God. Many Christian mystics bring this up. In Hindu traditions, the reason they have so many different deities, gods and goddesses, some of them are very vicious, some of them are dark, and some of them are heavy. Well, they exist because they are also a part of God. And so when we're able to embrace, somehow you find a way, lovingly, all those aspects of this divine consciousness, which is also a part of you, which is you, then you become whole. So the razor edge that we're running there is taking responsibility as much as we can for our life, and acknowledging that we need to have routine and we need to live in harmony with the natural order of things, but also understand that there are going to be things that routine and natural order can't explain or aren't going to prevent. And how do we make it through that? How do we embrace that? How do we learn to see that as also an aspect of God? How do we reconcile that? And that's a part of growing to mental and emotional maturity, spiritual maturity. And this is one thing that Mr. Davis had said to me before I had become or was ordained as a Center for Spiritual Awareness minister and authorized to teach Kriya Yoga. His requirement of the meditating well was to be as mentally, emotionally, and spiritually mature as possible. So we have to see all aspects of our life in this way, and we have to come at it from that point of view in order to keep the enthusiasm, in order to keep our practice enlivened, because it's not an end, it doesn't have an end goal in the sense of you get somewhere and just stop. As long as you are alive, as long as you are embodied, as long as you have a sense of individualization, you have a role to play as a vessel for this greater intelligence. When the role of this body, this mind, this sense of experience is done, well, it'll fade away and you'll be done. And then you will know, if you don't already, a sense of full liberation of consciousness, a sense of full oneness. And this occurs both in difficult times when you think things are a natural expression of God because it's beautiful and wonderful and bliss-filled as everyone seems to make it out to be. But you also, as you become more mature, and as they say in the Bhagavad Gita, that the yogi is meant to endure pleasure and pain while the yogi seeks knowledge, while the yogi seeks to experience and embody knowledge. Then in those difficult times, you find a way to embrace, how is this the divine too? How is this the infinite consciousness too? How is this also a face or a facet of this whole experience? And how can I accept it as an integrated part of everything I consider to be God, everything I consider to be part of this spiritual path? And when those things start to weld together, or you see, you let go of the seam, or you see seamlessly this rise and fall of experience in this life, the good and the bad and the neutral and so on, and you can embrace it all as part of an expression of this wholeness. From a mental perspective, you're very close to that acceptance of, well, as Yogananda said, a direct perception of reality. So by deep meditation, you calm the thoughts and waves within your mind, these things that cause the ordinary perceptions of reality. And then you experience superconsciousness. And in this way, you will behold reality as it is, which will have nothing, well, not much to do with your personality and your preferences and your aversions and your attachments. But by deep meditation, you do this. And by having an organized life, it's easier for you to access a depth of meditation. That's why discipline has always been so important in the yogic tradition, not to punish someone, not to beat out someone's ego, but because it gives a kind of harmony, and it prevents one from wasting a lot of time in trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do here? Those codes outlined in the Gita and the Yoga Sutras, those are there to create a proper structure such that the light of this awakened experience can be reflected well in this world, in this time-space continuum. So that is why we do what we do when it comes to practicing meditation and practicing Kriya Yoga. So consider this over the next week or so. throughout the day, in your meditation, or not in your meditation, do your meditation. After you get done meditating, contemplate, how can this be applied? How can this understanding percolate through into your everyday experience? Because by doing that, then you, in a sense, baptize or enliven your whole life with this energy, this intention of living such that you can behold reality, God, divine, infinite consciousness, everything as it is. And then there will be nothing left for you to know. And that is the purpose of this work.